Director, writer, composer Brent McCorkle makes films that are known for their heartfelt and visually compelling storytelling. Prior to co-directing Jesus Revolution, Brent co-wrote, co-edited, and composed the original score on the Lionsgate hit I Can Only Imagine. And that faith-based film starred Dennis Quaid and J. Michael Finley and was a big box office success. Brent's first project with the Erwin Brothers was Woodlawn, a sports drama based on the true story of Miami Dolphins superstar running back Tony Nathan, starring Sean Astin, Sherri Shepherd, and Jon Voight. And Brent's feature film debut as a director was the drama Unconditional, which starred Michael Ealy and Lynn. Unconditional was nominated for Outstanding Independent Motion Picture by the NAACP Image Awards in 2013. But we are here today to talk all things Jesus Revolution. So, ladies and gentlemen, multi-talented filmmaker and co-director of Jesus Revolution, Brent McCorkle, to the show. Welcome, Brent.
Man, thank you so much. It's really good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I have to say, I absolutely fell in love with this incredible movie. What a multifaceted story. How did you come across it?
Yeah, so I co-directed with John Irwin. We had done multiple projects together. So we did Woodlawn together. We also did I Can Only Imagine together, and we collaborate really well. I love John and Andy, and I just fit in with those guys. Andy is a wonderful editor. He loves working with actors. He's a music guy, and John's a director of photography and a writer. And I kind of dabble in all of that. So I fit in with both of them. They both work in slightly different hemispheres, and I was able just to come in there with them and be together with them on all aspects of the filmmaking. And so one day at the office, John comes in with this crazy looking Time magazine, and it has a psychedelic Jesus on it. It's very cryptic. It just says Jesus Revolution. He said, "Guys, I found our next movie." And it was this beautiful 10-page spread about this revival that sparked in Southern California. It went all over the country. It went to Europe. It was a worldwide phenomenon that occurred, and Time magazine covered it. And it was just a beautiful story. So we started doing research 7 years ago, when I was actually one of their employees, and that was my big job for several months, was researching this movie, doing deep dive. I read multiple books, watched documentaries, found archival footage from the period and from the time. And the 30,000 foot view of the thing is the hippie movement was coming to an end. All the kids ended up disillusioned. They looked for it for their peace in all the nooks and crannies of counterculture, and they still came up empty. What they were rebelling against, though, was good. The parents' generation had become very materialistic, very plastic, very happy with their materials that they'd accumulated. They just wanted to basically party and have a plastic life after World War II. And I understand that. I do. But the kids looked at that, the way their parents were crafting their lives, and like, yeah, we don't want what you guys have. We reject this categorically out of hand. We don't care about your materialism. We'd rather actually go live on the streets and be homeless. And that's what they chose to do. You have rampant pandemic of runaways and kids just leaving, and it was really sad. It was terrible, and the kids didn't do it gracefully at all. They ghosted their parents, and this is back before cell phones or internet or anything like that. I mean, you had parents worried sick because their kids just ran away, and they never even knew where they went. A lot of them went to San Francisco, and they crashed the municipal system of San Francisco. The city couldn't keep up with the population, and it was a really bad. It was like, it just, even as far as basic like sanitation and hygiene and that kind of thing, like the city could not handle this onslaught of runaway children that descended on their city, and caused a lot of problems. But in the midst of all that, these kids were on a quest. They were actually searching for a deeper meaning to their lives, and that's a beautiful quest. So our film begins when we meet this square, moralist, conservative pastor who has this ailing church. There's only like 20 grumpy people left in his church, and they're all just ready for the world to end. In the 60s, people thought the world was ending. It was just a terrible, horrible time. all this awful things happening across the globe, as we know. Um, but on a dare, basically on a challenge, from this chance encounter meeting with a hippie street preacher who had actually gotten to the end of his hippie quest and found Jesus. Uh, Chuck is faced with this evangelical hippie preacher that says, you know, are are you going to let these kids stay out on the street and just be lost and wander? Or are you going to understand the idea that God loves everybody, Jesus loves these kids, and actually you're shutting the door on them and not letting them in your church? How messed up is that? And Chuck took that challenge, and he was very scared, but he opened up his doors and these hippie kids started going to his church. So you have these disparate groups coming together in the wildest of places, which is an evangelical church, and finding solace there, finding a sense of community and belonging and unity and love and compassion and empathy. And there were some places we couldn't go in the film, but there was one cool story that I heard. Chuck would often very quietly pay for kids' Greyhound bus tickets out of his own money because the kids would get right, and they'd be like, "Oh, I can't believe I can't believe I was that hateful to my parents," and he would pay and put them on a bus and just let them go home to be with their family. So I really found that to be a beautiful story as well. That we just didn't have time to cover in the movie, but yeah, for a brief moment in time, there was just this ecumenical love from these groups that wouldn't fit together, especially under the roof of a conservative evangelical Christian church, and yet it happened. And it's very nuanced in our movie, but the kids brought in a lot that the church needed, and that is love, acceptance, peace, hope, unity, accept more of an acceptance in their culture of people who are different than them, and the church needed that. The church needs that again today, quite frankly. And
Yeah.
I think,
Well, how did
yeah,
you
I think
come
we're
up, well, with the writing team? How did you come up with the multiple storylines? Because the film is really focused on that period of time of the Jesus Revolution. But then we see the other storyline of really the birth of Greg Laurie and how it intersects together. How did that happen?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. Woodlawn has an intersectionality with the Jesus movement. So the chaplain who goes to the school and is trying to unite and unify the teams that are segregated because of race and all the terrible things happening at the time. That chaplain was a product of the Jesus movement. So as we were getting ready to do Woodlawn, that's what triggered John to finding the Time magazine article. Um, because we were kind of in the Jesus movement time, in the Woodlawn timeline, the time period of that movie. And so, in the midst of all that, John Erwin strikes up a friendship with Greg. And one day, the way the story goes, at least, one day John was like, "Hey, I'm trying to do this movie about the Jesus movement. I found this Time magazine article." And Greg goes, "I was there, right? I went to Chuck's church. I knew Lonnie. I was friends with both of them." And John was like, "What?" So the rest is history. I mean, we interviewed Greg for 20 hours, him and Kathy, 20 hours of footage, and Greg ends up writing the book, which is kind of the pretext to the Life Right section of the movie. It's called The Jesus Revolution. He wrote it with a wonderful writer, like Ellen. And so yeah, together they wrote that book, and that became kind of the springboard for our film. But yes, it was a calculated move too, to do an ensemble story. Like, so you have Chuck, who's a little bit older. You have some middle-aged people in the storyline, like Lonnie, and then you have the younger kid generation. And so one of John Irwin's big dreams is to get families watching content again together, because we're in such a time of division, whether it be socio-politically, ideologically, and also I would add to that, maybe the strongest thing is our screens. So right now, even with my family, I have 5 kids. like on a road trip in the 80s, man, we would play games together and or talk, but man, now it's like 7 people on a screen doing 7 completely different things. So screens are actually contributing in large part to the division that we're experiencing in our country and in the world. And so it's one of Jon's dreams is to try to create things on screens that actually bring people together, and I think that's really beautiful. So you
Yeah,
have a stack of multi-generational cast that is in hopes of bringing people from different age groups into the theater to watch this movie together. So Greg, beautiful love story. He's younger. It's his rise. It's his coming of age, and we get to kind of walk through all of this with him and experience it with him as a younger person. And I think it worked really well. But as
it
far as
worked
the writing,
perfect. Yeah, it worked
yeah,
perfectly. And I'm very curious because how did your team gather up such an incredible all-star cast? I mean, people Kelsey Grammer, Kimberly Williams Paisley, Jonathan Rumi, the list goes on. How did you get those people together or to say yes to this film?
man, I have to brag on the writers. I'm very picky. I'm very critical. I want stuff to be very good. And when I read the script, I cried. And and they were offering it to me to co-direct with Jon. I was like, well, I'll read it and see. But even with Woodlawn, man, Andy called me and it caught him a little bit off guard, but he really respected me. He's like, hey, I want you to edit this with me. I was like, okay, well, send me the script. I need to read the script, man. I need to know what it is. I'm not just gonna tell you yes until I read the script. And I read it. And I was like, man, this is really good. I want to do it. But I think that's how it should be. So when I read the script for Jesus Revolution, I called Jon Erwin and said, man, this is really good. It was the best, like the best 30 or 40, the first 30 or 40 pages of the script was the best thing he had ever written. I mean, it was amazing stuff. And he's a good writer, but he wrote it with John Gunn. But we had people from all walks of life say yes to this, and it was off the strength of the script. The script was very, very well done, and I was impressed. And it was a big challenge for me because as far as my directing career, I've written everything I've directed, so I had to come at this a completely different way as the non-writer and find my way into this. Almost like an actor does because the words are already written, and I was like, okay, well, how do I find myself in this that's already been written? And so yeah, the strength of the cast I think is a direct correlation to the fact that the script was really strong. And the other part, and this is just insider baseball movie making stuff, but people will pay more attention to you when it's quote unquote real. So Lionsgate wanted to do this movie and they had a budget and we set a date that we were going to make it. And then you start calling people going, this is real. We're shooting it in March. We have this much money and here's the schedule. And do you want to do it or not? And that is an awesome currency when you're talking to agents and managers because there's so much stuff out there that's not real and there's so much nebulous talk about something that may happen in 3 years. So when you come up to someone and go, we're doing this, will you please read the script? We think you'll like it. We think you're great in this. And man, I have to tell you, we got all of the people that we wanted.
So you didn't have to
And the
do
cast,
a casting audition.
no, with the people like Kelsey, you're not going to read them. When a person gets to a certain caliber of
Stardom.
success and gravitas and the Emmys and all that, you're not going to call them to read. You're gonna what they do. You know what they're capable of. They know what they do. They know what they're capable of. It's really a function of do they respond to the material or not. And so yeah, so we didn't read a lot of these guys, and if we did read them, it was often because we were looking at a character that we were going to put alongside them, and we just needed to see how it felt with the other characters. But yeah, so everybody that we went out to, um, said yes, and the the people that we found in casting alongside them were just as amazing. I mean, the whole cast is amazing, and there's a wonderful saying in our business, and I think it's so beautiful. But the saying goes, "There are no small parts, only small actors." And we had no small actors in our movie. Even the
None.
guys that had one line, we I agonized over our one line characters as much as I agonized over the big characters, because I've seen movies fail where all you do is you focus really hard on your LA and New York talent, and then you pepper in all these other people that nobody cares about. That's, well, number one, it's demeaning to your actors that are going to day play for you, and number two, that does no service for your film. Every actor in your movie is important. It's not the number of lines that they get; it's the quality of that moment that you do see them on screen. And so I was angsty about it, man. I was, directors can be fussy sometimes, but I was very fussy about casting, and they actually ended up adding a very strong locals casting director, because you cast all your big people out of LA and all this stuff, and then you start casting locally because it saves you some money, and you have to fly everybody in and all that stuff. It becomes a budgetary issue. But our local casting was just as strong as our LA and our New York casting, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the team, and we had some amazing casting directors on this.
Well, what and I always like asking film questions. So all of
Sure.
my viewers and listeners know that I like to bring the inside out, so to speak, so they can understand how film is done. If I watch a movie, I'll watch the movie, but I'm also watching other things. For you, what was it like actually co-directing, and how does one co-direct? If there's two directors, what type of decisions do you have to make, and do you ever have a little bit of disagreements?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, there are disagreements, but you do all that in prep. Um, I mean, the greatest analog would be uh, a pilot and a wingman. If you guys are both trying to fly to two different destinations, you're going to crash the plane, and you're going to break the controls, and you're going to crash the plane into the ocean. But if you're going in the same place, actually having a wingman along with you, so you can actually sleep or get a bathroom break, or like, you know, um, I think you get there safer, you get there faster, and you probably have a little more fun along the way. But as long as you figure out where you're headed and make sure like the plane is full of fuel, and everybody's baggage got loaded, right? It's like there's a commonality to where you're headed, and when you can get on the same page, right? Then you know your bearings, you know your headings, and you're going in the same direction. So together we knew where we were going, where we were headed, and any kind of disagreements we had. Like, there was disagreements over locations. John liked a house more than I did. And we didn't fight. We never like argued or yelled at each other. But you're going to have creative disagreements. We're subjective. Most of our lives are in the subjective realm. There are going to be people that don't like this movie. Obviously, there are going to be people that love this movie. So yeah, we had creative disagreements for sure, but we worked all that out. But by the time you get on set, you just have to have each other's back, and have spent enough time together to know exactly where you're going. If anything gets challenged, or there's some new situation that arises, you're both going to have a very similar answer. And so yeah, we did it, man. We pulled it off. But you solve a lot of your subjective, is the couch blue? Is the couch red? Does it matter? But all that stuff you solve
Well,
ahead of
the
time.
the thing that I loved about the casting, and let's go back to the casting just for a moment here, because I've seen
Okay.
all the films that you have worked on. They are in a class by themselves. The quality is it's excellence is what it is. And to have actors that the general public knows by name really makes the ministry of the film that much stronger, and to me more broad range, to bring viewers in that may not actually go see a faith-based film or download one. And when I saw Kelsey Grammer and I saw Kimberly Williams Paisley, I was just like, this movie is already a hit just for the casting alone. And to me, it's a ministry. And the whole point of these films is to not just talk to the choir and only have the choir watch it, but to have the harvest watch it and to bring them in. And it's
Yeah, man, I
powerful.
appreciate you. Well, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. like I said, the strength of the script I think really helped us, and it the content was interesting and fascinating. I will tell you a really beautiful story about Kelsey in particular. He was on a weekend retreat with some of his buddies in the film business, and they got to a bit of a sad part in their weekend, and they started lamenting the fact that not everything they had done had any significance, and they made a bit of a blood oath, to try to target projects and material that had spiritual significance, and they made a pact, to try to do more of that in the future of their career. Well, he gets back from this retreat and wakes up the next morning, and the Jesus Rev script was in his inbox, and he read it, called his agent, and he said, "I don't care about the money. I don't care about the schedule. I'm doing this movie. Work it out." And that never happens, man. Like, I just
Well,
so I don't
I
know if you've
get it.
watched it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get what Kelsey's thinking in this aspect. When I look at high quality faith based films like you have done and you had your hands on, I mean, I can only imagine, oh my gosh, like I said, you have to grab the Kleenex every time. Then there's Unconditional, Woodlawn. I mean, and there's so many others. But it falls into a category kind of like Christmas movies. Those actors in very successful Christmas movies, it's almost like they've solidified their legacy forever. I mean, It's a Wonderful Life is what? That film's like 80 years old, okay? And faith-based films, to me, high quality like the ones you've worked on, it's going to be the same way for those actors, especially for the Christian community. I mean, my gosh, you mentioned Passion of the Christ. The first thing that pops into our mind is Mel Gibson. I mean, he will forever be known as the man that brought that film to life. And so when I see Kelsey and these other actors and, Dennis Quaid and I can only imagine, I'm thinking, wow, these actors are going to be known for those roles over a much longer period of time where their other films we're not actually going to remember. So there
Yeah,
is, I can
yeah,
see why Kelsey and others would say, yeah, I want to do something that means something.
yeah. And I don't know. I would say both in with the case of Dennis Quaid and Kelsey Grammer. Um, I don't think any of the filmmakers can take credit for this, but I think in both their cases, it's the best thing they've ever done. So I mean,
I agree.
It was Dennis Quaid in a way I'd never seen him before. He did stuff in that movie. I edited that movie, and man, I just the dailies would come in, and I would just be blown away by the depth of his work and what he was doing. And Kelsey was just on another level on this movie. It's his wife feels like it's the best thing he's ever done, and I agree with her. I think it's his greatest. I think it's the performance of his lifetime,
It
honestly.
is.
And
It
to
is. And I want to ask you, Brent, because what I found so refreshing with this film is that it exposed the hard truths of churches who are stagnant, um, pastors needing to ask themselves, who are they going to answer to? Who are they going to serve? What have pastors told you who have seen this film?
I have heard some pretty awesome things. I've heard some pretty brutal things. I actually have a friend of mine who is a hardcore evangelical preacher, but he's kind of a hippie street preacher vibe. He's pretty fiery, but yeah, they this church invite, and he preaches to youth, young kids a lot, and he's just down in the trenches with this younger generation, and this younger generation is hurting, man. They're hurting, and it seems like um, a lot of churches have gotten so entrenched politically that they're forgetting about souls, and they would rather fight some sort of crazy political, ideological, moralist war. Which I don't really think. If you look at the life of Jesus, he went out of his way to stay out of politics. And then when people would try to trap him in politics, he would have the most incredible answers. And it was basically he would answer them with questions and be like, "Well, is that really what we're about?" He's like, I'm kind of busy healing the sick and feeding the poor, and working with these people and their trauma and their issues to deal with that right now. So
Well,
I think
yeah. I mean,
he's
it's
pointed the way. You know.
well one of the funny moments, and I really took it funny because I've seen it, I've heard stories, and especially during the era in which this film is based on. When the older gentleman mentions the carpet, I started laughing because how many churches in America have literally split over the disagreement over the color of the carpet or the color of the drapes? And I thought, there is so much truth there. How many people will actually catch it?
Yeah, I hope a lot of people catch it. To go back, kind of finish the answer to your question, my friend was preaching and he said, "This is powerful, man." I was in tears. A bunch of people watched the movie. They in a pre-screen and they were fired up about it. They're all excited. He's like, "All right, how many of you right now? If we open up the doors, you would let a hippie sit by you and you'd give him a hug and yeah, like the whole crowd just exploded. He's like, all right, great. Well, how many of you guys today, if we open up our doors, you let a gay couple or a transgender kid come sit next to you or a drug addict or a prostitute? Who's with me? Uh, it got real quiet really fast. And people don't realize it's easy now to look back in history at what was to be done properly to love on a hippie, but it's much harder to get people to catch up to it now. It's like there's a time lag, but the disenfranchised, the marginalized people groups today who don't see any concept of sanctuary in the church. As a matter of fact, it's like one of the most unsafe places you could go. If you ask a bunch of children today outside the church to make a list of safe spaces if the bottom drops out of their life, if you had them do their top 10, the church is not going to be on that list. And that breaks my heart, man. Because if you think about the concept of sanctuary and the safe spaces that Jesus created everywhere he went, except for the religious people.
Well, churches are becoming very drive-through oriented, and to tell you the truth, half this film brought tears to my eyes, not only because it was done in the most excellent sort of way. It was the message. It was also the messages that resonate today. I have a very big problem with today's modern church because a lot of them seem to be focused on branding and not on Jesus. People get saved, but there's no discipleship. And so I can understand why young people don't place the church as a safe space in their top 10, because I get that. I get it. I mean, it's clear as day. And today, I think the church is failing in a very, very big way. And I pray, truly pray, that this film opens up the eyes of the church body and says, look, those doors are supposed to be open to everyone. And it is up to the Holy, it is the Holy Spirit. It is that power. It is the message of the gospel that changes hearts. And we have to realize that it still happens today. Church isn't a routine. It's a ministry. It's a way of life. It's who we believe in. It's who we serve. And we're supposed to be that shining light. And Brent, Jesus Revolution is a cinematic shining light to the world right now.
Oh man, thank you. Yeah, it brings up a lot of emotions and feelings for me. I'm a pastor's kid, and I think for me, I hope this movie is a return back to the love of God and Jesus' love for everybody. If everybody is a soul, and Jesus loves every soul, we should try to live our lives in that way and see people as souls that are hurting, irrespective of how they present in the world in their body. Um, everybody is a soul that is worthy of love and made in God's image and is God's child. So yeah, man, I'm on that train, dude. I think to your larger question, I really do hope Christian thought leaders and pastors look at this and are challenged to rethink what they're doing, what they're not doing. And when we talk about this stuff, it can become very offensive to people. And so I think making a definition here is important. But the church is the body of Christ, and that's a spiritual being. So when you talk about the spiritual being, that's always going to be something that shouldn't be criticized. That the church is an extension of Christ to the world. But there's also the church that is a corporation. It's an industrialized complex. It's a money making thing, and we have to look at all that stuff and criticize it. You have to look at uh, the mission or the lack thereof of this industrialized thing that is happening. And quite frankly, man, I tell people this a lot. If Jesus had just run his life as a normal rabbi and done what all the other rabbis were doing, which is they would open up the scripture and they would teach in church. If he had done his life like that, there would not be a religion built around him. He did his life outside of the religious community. And all the stories that we know him for, with the exception of one or two, are outside of the church. They're outside. They're not in the temple. They're outside with the people. And man, I think that's a message that's resonant today. There's the people that we need to go to outside the church, and never expect them to come to inside these walls of this industrial thing that's gotten created in the West. And I actually applaud some of these guys that, I think the kids that are having problems with that part of church and that part of culture, I think they're right. I think it's similar to the time of the hippies where it's like, yeah, you guys are completely missing the point of this and I don't really want to participate. But if we could cut through all of that and actually introduce them to Jesus, who he was, how he acted, to this man that said, I've heard it said, an eye for an eye, but I'm telling you, you actually need to love your enemies and you need to bless those who curse you. Like, that's a radical dude. Like, no
Well,
one does
yeah,
that.
and well, yeah, because today's youth, you can't get nothing by them because
That's
we
right.
live in a world of immense technology. And, I hear the terms, which I really do get sick of, but they're out there. People want to be authentic. They want you to know their truth. Not that it's actually true, but you can't hide anything from them. But one of the biggest parts of the film that I absolutely loved, and I had to go back. I had to think about the Word of God in this because when Kelsey Grammer's character Chuck is standing in front of his 20-member congregation, here is 20 people sitting in their safe space.
That's right.
Nobody's ruffling their feathers, and in a way, they're bigots and racist in the context of their spiritual standing. But then, what did Jesus say? He said, go out into the world. That's where the harvest is. Yes, the workers are few. And then when Lonnie shows up, and then Chuck's like, he takes that step. And my favorite part of that film was when that older man crosses the aisle. That was powerful. And when those doors opened, what happened? The church was added to daily. It was the Word of God brought to life and action right then and there. And I think churches today need to realize that you can talk to the choir all you want and you can take that offering, same offering every week. But there's a whole world out there that's dying that would love to come through those doors if you would just open them up.
Man, you are on mission, brother. Some of the greatest, and it's so easy to for atheists to throw rocks or for ultra liberals to throw rocks, and I get it. And they have good points, and the points are valid. However, I find myself in the middle. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I tell this story a lot, but there was a time in America where you had two very strong groups of Christians that took their kids to church and taught them the Bible and made them, say their prayers before bed. You had slaveholders and you had abolitionists. Both of them built a culture around Jesus. They both had faith in Jesus, but like one of them were walking in truth and were walking actually in the spirit of Christ, and the other wasn't. So there are these moments in time where you actually see Christian thought and Christian belief and Christian faith overthrow a construct that is evil and bad. Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King. We have people using Christian faith to great effect on our planet, changing our culture, changing our world. But then you have the opposite. You actually have the opposite. You have people in the name of Jesus creating like some of the most awful, horrible, evil, hateful cultural drags, in society. So I guess what I would say to any kid that's watching or any parent or pastor is, are you on mission? Because yeah, you can have church and do your fun stuff and have your smoke machines and your worship music and all that stuff. And that stuff has a place. It really does, and I hope that doesn't come across too cynically.
No, and
But
Brent, but I do want to ask you something because, and I pray, I really truly pray that people, especially who are in ministry, when they see this film, that they will see a very particular part of this film and take it to heart. Why was it important to put the pride factor in this film when it came to
yeah,
Lonnie?
that goes. Yeah, and I really want to brag on my co-director John Irwin. That's another piece of our movie that we really wanted to start deconstructing, and that is, and it's a leftover vestige and an orphan from the Quakerism and the Puritanism in this soil that we live in now. But in the Puritan persuasion and the Quaker persuasion, you had to be so saturated on the inside, uh, at least that was the idea, that you achieved almost like a perfection on your outside. You only quoted scriptures, you never said anything wrong. You had this perfect veneer and this perfect facade, and we find that in our church today. If you're a church leader, man, you're in a glass house and you're afraid, and like if you struggle with alcoholism, or if you have something in your personal life that would cause you shame or whatever, you're gonna hide it, you're gonna suppress it. I heard a story last night, I won't get into it, but like suppressed child abuse, child sexual abuse in the church. Like you have churches that would rather suppress that stuff than let it get out and hurt their industrialized complex. They don't want people to leave the church. They would rather sweep that stuff under the rug than actually bring it to the light. And number one, it's not biblical. Uh, our the greatest stories that people chose to write, uh, about in the Bible are these deeply broken, flawed human beings. And so it was important to John, especially to start demystifying that, saying, hey, this revival was actually really messy. There was a lot of egos, and there was a lot of bad choices made, and there was a lot of hateful words said, and actually just a bunch of messy humans. And when we can get back to that, I actually think we'll all grow more spiritually because we'll learn how to love each other. I mean, I had a pastor, man, I was in tears. I might start crying talking about it, but I had a pastor here in Texas. I went to his church for many years, and he had a bunch of tragedy. They had lost a child to a very tragic circumstance. It was a suicide. It was just very terrible. But he got up one day and he said, hey, my wife, if you guys know, my wife has been, sometimes coming to church and sometimes not. The truth is she's struggling with alcoholism right now. We're working through that, and we're going to get her checked into a rehab and get her some help. And man, he was broken and just in tears. But he could have hid that. He could have pretended like everything was fine, but instead he chose to be like authentic and transparent and vulnerable.
Yeah, because
in front of
see,
the whole
yeah, because in the movie, Chuck, well, I mean, what would have happened if Chuck never confronted Lonnie about the pride factor and just let it go? I mean, that's a cancer that will grow and hurt more people. But Chuck stood up. He saw right through it. And I know people who have been in Lonnie's shoes and had that same thought, that same persona. You get so caught up. You read your word, you pray, but then you're feeding off the audience. But then Chuck saw that. And we need more Chucks in this world to help the young ones, because we've seen it. You've seen it. Young people get on fire for Jesus, and it is awesome to see. And then there's not that helping, guiding hand to keep them from harming themselves. And pride is that harm, because not only does it hurt them, it hurts others down the road, and some people never come back from the damage that it causes. So I applaud you and Jon for putting that in the film, because Christian leaders today, pastors, youth pastors, they need to see that can happen to them.
Yeah, and it was more nuanced in the film, but Chuck had his own struggles too. I think he definitely wanted to control things, and I think he was a workaholic, and so it was way more nuanced. Sometimes you have to pick who you're going to focus on, but like what we were really trying to say in the larger idea is that, and Jon even wrote it in the script, but in the end he said and when Chuck is apologizing to Greg for some mistakes he'd made, he said, "Fortunately, God has a long history of using broken, flawed people," and that was really what we were trying to get across. Is like it was messy, it wasn't all perfect, and I think that's important, because on the flip side of this argument, I think there's a lot of people. Let's say you got a divorce, or you had something really bad in your past, and I think in our culture, right, like cancel culture, and you're castigated by society for past transgressions, and mistakes. I think a lot of people sit it out on the sidelines because they feel shame. They have trauma from the church of being shamed out, or they carry a perpetual guilt for things in their past. And while you should wrestle with the consequences of your actions always, and you should grapple with the consequences of your choices and why you made those choices always, sure, but
yeah,
at some point you got to get back off the ground and get back on mission, because our mission is to love people and love well, and not, to your point earlier, I thought it was so great, not just love somebody of your own stripe. That costs you nothing.
you're
That costs
right.
you nothing, man. It's like Jesus said. I think he said even even like the raunchiest, most terrible people in the world love their kids to a degree. That's easy, like but like getting out and loving a stranger, loving somebody different than you, loving someone on the opposite side of the political spectrum than you, loving a refugee or an immigrant, or somebody, maybe even somebody in your past that's caused you harm. Like I think that's where Jesus is encouraging us to go. And so
Yeah.
I love what Chuck did, just that in that moment of surrender, opening up his door to something that he didn't understand and was judgmental about, but also, on the other side of that, obedience, these really peaceful, loving, kind, inclusive humans come into the church and kind of blow it all up, and I could see that. I could definitely see that happening again today. But my big takeaway, I really do hope, it's just an infusion of love into this culture. I hope people go see it over and over again and take friends. And it's not overtly preachy. It's not trying to bang you over the head with something. I think it's trying to show the world that there's a loving, peaceful way of how Jesus showed us to operate and how to love each other. And it would be great if we could all get back on message and find, the other way I would say that really quick is Paul said it so eloquently and beautifully. I'm going to butcher it. I'm going to do the pastor's kid paraphrase of this, but he said basically, from where he was standing, that the three things that he saw as the greatest three things in the universe are faith, hope, and love. But then he went on to say, but above all that is love. So someone may not have your faith. They may not believe the same way you do. They may be hopeless. Those three aren't prerequisites for each other. They don't play on the same level. Above all the right and the wrong and the politics and the hate and the cancel culture and the judgment, The identity crisis above all of that is love. And if we tap into that and start working from the top down, like how Jesus did, um, the world's going to change. So when Chuck is like washing the feet of those hippies, I've seen this movie 1,000 times, but I shed tears every time I see the film because he's actually functioning as Jesus would in that moment, and I just find it to be one of the most beautiful things in the world.
This film is an incredible love story. Yes, the love of Christ, but also the love of Chuck and Lonnie and Greg, Kathy, and all these other people in the film. And I think anybody who sees this film, it doesn't matter what age they are, they're going to receive something very, very powerful. But with this film, what have you been hearing from people who've seen this movie with the early screenings? What are some of the things that are resonating to you?
Yeah, it's great. I would say it's two edges of the same sword. So it's a feel good movie. It's very uplifting. It's very buoyant. It's very positive. It's so loving. And we need that in our culture right now. It's like we're coming up out of a really dark time. And I think people are really sick of the malaise, and we're coming out of the pandemic. And, we're just ready to, I think, just get back to more of a loving way of being and existing with each other. So we check all the boxes there on our film. But then I also hear the stuff of people who are challenged, like, whoa, I I had a beautiful phone call last night, from an ex pastor, and he said, "Man, I've lost my fire. I'm cold. Like, my embers are dying out, and I just don't have the love for people like I used to." And like in tears, challenged, voice shaking. It's like I'm praying that God like renews this love for humanity and people because I'm not there anymore like I used to be. And I was like, whoa. so so I
Well,
think
pastors
the
don't get
movie gives us,
recharged like the congregation does.
yeah, yeah. So I think this movie is going to give culture a hug, and people are really going to feel the spirit move in the theaters. I'm just hearing crazy stories like that, but I think also to your larger point and the larger point of this conversation we're having, I think it also ask some hard questions and issues some challenges, especially to our leaders. But it's done in love, right? I mean, we would be major hypocrites and total failures if we did it uh, in a hateful, screaming, judgmental way. Like it's not. It's got to be the opposite of scream at somebody in all caps on Facebook. Like we just went the opposite way. We've done that. It doesn't work. It's not working. It's completely failing. So our movie tries to put its money where its mouth is and walk a very loving, kind, inclusive road, and but at the same time in a loving way maybe ask some tough questions.
It
So I
does.
hope people the questions
Yeah,
and grapple with them.
it will. And ladies and gentlemen, Jesus Revolution debuts February 24th and in a theater near you. Now, Brent, what is this I hear about bees and goats?
People would be surprised, I guess. I am I'm a wannabe farmer. My wife and I bought 15 acres. It's a little hobby farm just out of Nashville. It's in South rural, it's rural South Tennessee. And yes, I have a bunch of goats. I have a bunch of chickens. I'm a beekeeper. My editor on this movie, incredible editor, but he's my ride or die on the bees. So me and John work on the bees on weekends, and we have a good time. I love my farm, and that's another problem with culture is we were nomadic. 30,000 years ago there were no cities. We were all just nomads, walking around, finding our own food and just making a go of it in nature. And I think our DNA, and our bodies and even our hearts and souls crave nature. So it's been an amazing thing for me to just purposely make a promise to myself and a commitment to myself to be out in nature more, and God will meet you there. It's it's pretty amazing. But I love my animals. They're like family to me, and so yeah, it's a really beautiful, it's a beautiful thing, but it's a lot of hard work, and sometimes you're mucking the barn and questioning all of your life choices, but it's still fun, and I love it. But yeah, that's a weird nerdy fact about me. But yeah, I do love
I
little
love it.
blonde bird.
I love it. And Brent, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on the show.
Man, thank you for having me, and thank you for these really deep questions. I think a lot of people are asking these questions, and um, I really do feel like these are questions that demand to be asked, because I think culture is wanting to change, and we're hitting a lot of dead ends right now. And I think whether you go to church or not, whether you're a believer, have faith, whether you're an atheist, whatever, wherever you come from, wherever you hail from, I think we can all agree on the fact that we need to return to love. And I love it that we can look at that from a very, very Christian story, and see for this brief moment in time where it happened.
And I think, and I pray that every ministry that sees this film will understand that when you ask somebody, do you know Jesus? It becomes a life or death question. And ladies and gentlemen, you've got to see this film. Jesus Revolution is a must-see film for you, your whole family, your friends. When it debuts at the theater February 24th. And look, we need revolution. And in this case, revolution equals revelation that equals revival. And we're seeing that revival right now in our country. And Jesus Revolution debuts in a theater near you February 24th. And I'm going to say it now. You need to go see it. And when it finally comes available as a download and a DVD, you need to buy it. You need to share it. And hopefully, the prayer will be that when you see this film, boldness will rise up in you. Because there's always somebody we know or somebody we meet that doesn't know Jesus. Jesus said the harvest is great and the workers are few. And some of those workers carry film cameras, and they're bringing the gospel to life in a whole new way, and in the only way the Holy Spirit can. I'll see you next time.
It's a story of finding yourself, finding your way, finding faith. I just think it's going to be so uplifting.
There's comedy, there's tenderness, there's complexity with all of the characters.
The production value is incredible. It feels like we've just been dropped into a moment in history.
Audiences are going to get a strong message of love and hope.
I hope people feel tearful and joyful all at the same time, and maybe inspired to rediscover their own faith.
It's been 7 years to the screen for this movie, and every other movie that we've made along the way, Woodlawn, I Can Only Imagine, I Still Believe, American Underdog, it's all been leading to this. I remember discovering the Jesus Revolution Time magazine cover story, and it was like unearthing this gem, and that led to this whole exploration. I want to meet people that lived this. Come to find out, Greg was a teenager, as was his wife, Kathy, at the very origin of the Jesus movement in Southern California.
The Jesus movement was an awakening. Not only was it the last great American awakening, I think it may have been the most significant of all.
It's this beautiful fusion of Greg's coming-of-age story, this hippie street preacher, Lonnie Frisbee, and a down-and-out pastor who's pretty much lost everything, and to see him open up his doors to these hippies, that completely changed everything.
I think so many of us that were drawn into the hippie movement really were searching for something more.
Greg Laurie, at the time, is a lost soul. He's looking for truth, and he finds it in all the wrong places and in one right place.
Have you decided? I don't know. You want to decide right now?
One of the things that excited me most about the script was the theme. The theme is loving the other. I think that's what our world needs. I think our world really needs to heal.
I think it'll challenge people's notions of the need to be perfect to be a Christian.
I want audiences to be encouraged if they leave the
This house has a very good vibe. There is an entire generation searching.
Slow down, man, slow down.
Just in all the wrong places. If you want to reach my people, you need to speak to them in a language they understand.
If I bring them in, I'm going to lose my job.
We can only walk through doors open to us. In your church, that's a door that's shut.
You've probably noticed we have some guests here today. I'd like you to meet my new friends. Welcome.
They don't belong here. Half of them aren't even wearing shoes. They're staining the new shag carpet.
They need our help. If you feel like you're misunderstood and judged, you will find forgiveness and freedom right here.
That was awesome.
Now that door is open any time of day. And if there are some who don't like that, well then that door works both ways.
All right, Pastor, let's begin.
I was almost done with this, but then you did what nobody else would even dare.
This thing that we found, I feel like I belong.
You're gonna need a bigger church. Our country is a dark and divided place, but now there's hope, and it's spreading.
This is your home, and I want you to tell all your friends about it.